Okay, so you're thinking about adding some wood paneling to your next project, right?
Yeah.
It can seem kind of, I don't know, intimidating to get those cuts just right.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I told you there's a surprisingly simple way to do it?
Okay.
We're diving into the world of wood paneling today. And get this, you might not even need that power saw.
You're right to be thinking about clean cuts.
Yeah.
That's key to making any paneling project look, polished and professional. A lot of folks reach for the power tools right away, worried about ending up with a splintery mess.
Which I totally get. Splinters are the enemy of any DIY project, am I right?
Totally.
But this article from TigerFish Tools blew my mind. They recommend using a simple utility knife for cutting paneling.
Wow.
I mean, a utility knife, that's wild.
It does sound kind of crazy at first.
Yeah.
But when you understand how it works, it's actually brilliant.
Okay.
Think about it. A saw's teeth tear through the wood fibers, which is a recipe for jagged edges, especially with paneling. But a utility knife lets you score the wood along the grain, creating a clean line for it to snap along.
Okay, that makes sense. Working with the wool instead of against it.
Right.
So walk us through it. How does this whole utility knife method actually work?
Well, just like with any cutting project, the golden rule is measure twice, cut once.
Of course, yeah.
And the article stresses this even more, because with paneling, those measurements really matter. You want those seams to line up perfectly.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to be noticeable.
Yeah.
And those mistakes are tough to hide once the paneling is up.
You're telling me. I'm definitely someone who rushes into things sometimes,
Yeah.
so that measure twice advice is like permanently etched into my brain now.
Good.
Okay, so we've got our measurements triple checked.
All right.
What's next?
Next up, you'll need a straight edge, and not just casually holding it in place. We're talking a firm grip here. This is about having total control over the cut. Any slipping or sliding, and you risk a wobbly line and potentially wasting a whole piece of paneling.
So no pressure then.
Right.
I can just picture myself trying to hold that straight edge steady while my hand's shaking.
Yeah.
Be like, don't mess this up, don't mess this up.
It's all about that steady hand.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Remember, we're not sawing through the panel, we're scoring it.
Mm-hmm.
The article uses this great visual, they say, to angle the blade in like you're whispering a secret to the wood.
I love that. Okay, so whisper that secret to the wood. Got it. But how deep are we talking here? Do we want to go all the way through on the first pass?
That's where the finesse comes in.
Okay.
The goal is to score the outer layer of the wood fibers,
Okay.
just enough to create a precise line for the panel to snap along later,
Right.
not to cut all the way through.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's all about creating that perfect weak point without going all the way through. Like when you're carefully trying to tear a piece of paper out of a notebook and you go over the perforation a few times for a clean break.
Exactly. You're getting it.
Yeah.
You'll want to score the line multiple times, deepening the groove with each pass.
Okay, multiple passes. Got it. This is oddly satisfying just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So we flip the panel over, do the same thing on the other side, and then what?
Yeah.
So we've scored both sides,
Right.
and now it's time for the big reveal, right? What happens next?
You got it. This is where all that meticulous scoring pays off.
Okay.
Now you're going to lift one end of the panel
Mm-hmm.
and keep the other end firmly against your work surface.
So you're basically bending it along that score line,
Yeah.
kind of encouraging it to break?
Exactly. You're leveraging those score lines to help the wood break cleanly along the grain
Okay.
with minimal splintering.
Wow.
Ugh.
So satisfying.
Yeah.
It's like the wood almost wants to break that way. You know, before this deep dive, I would have been reaching for my jigsaw, terrified of messing it up. It's
Yeah.
amazing what a difference understanding the why behind the technique makes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Knowledge really is power when it comes to DIY.
Yeah.
Speaking of jigsaws, what happens if we're dealing with curves?
Oh, that's right.
You can't exactly use a straight edge for those.
Right. How does this method work if you're trying to get a little fancy with your paneling?
Good question. The article focuses on straight cuts for this technique,
Okay.
but it does offer some tips for curves.
Okay.
And this is where those power tools might come in handy,
Right.
like a jigsaw or circular saw.
Okay, so for curves, we're bringing in the power tools, but there's got to be a way to avoid those dreaded splinters, right?
Yeah, you're way ahead of me. The article mentions a clever trick
Okay.
using something every DIYer has on hand, painter's tape.
Painter's tape for preventing splinters. Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
It sounds crazy, but it works wonders.
Okay.
It creates a barrier between the saw blade and the wood veneer, which helps prevent those nasty tear-outs you often get with power tools.
Right.
Just apply a strip of painter's tape along your cut line.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure it's nice and smooth to avoid snags,
Right.
and you're good to go.
So it's all about giving that saw a smoother surface to glide over.
Exactly.
I'm filing that tip away for future projects for sure.
Yeah.
Who knew painter's tape was such a versatile tool? I'm always finding new uses for it. It's
Yeah.
like the duct tape of the DIY world.
It's a lifesaver.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the article focuses on using a utility knife,
Yeah,
I think the real takeaway here is learning to work with the wood.
that's such a great point. It's like you're
Mhm.
speaking the wood's language, right?
Mhm.
Instead of forcing it to do what you want.
Right.
No wonder I've had so many DIY fails in the past.
Yeah.
I wasn't respecting the grain.
Exactly. And that applies to any wood project,
Yeah.
whether you're using a saw, a chisel,
Mhm.
or even just sanding it down.
Yeah.
Understanding the grain direction is key to getting a clean, professional-looking result.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
Yeah.
Who knew that a humble utility knife could be the secret to beautiful wood paneling?
I know, right?
I'm ready to, ditch my fear of power tools and embrace the simplicity of this method.
It really does show that sometimes the simplest tools and techniques are the most effective.
Right.
It's not always about having the fanciest equipment.
Right.
It's about understanding the materials and how to work with them.
So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to give wood paneling a try, what's the one key takeaway you would leave them with?
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Okay.
Grab some scrap wood, practice those scoring techniques, get a feel for the utility knife.
Right.
You'll be amazed at how quickly you gain confidence and start getting those satisfying splinter-free breaks.
I love that. Practice makes perfect, right?
Exactly.
And who knows, you might even discover a hidden talent for woodworking along the way, right?
Exactly. There's a world of creative possibilities out there just waiting to be explored.
This has been awesome. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into the world of wood paneling.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Until next time.